Hi guys, I'm Mike and this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to another F1 Worldwide, the Fan Podcast, which is the podcast where we talk with fans around the world about Formula One, and we are remaining in England for this one, and today's guest is David. So David, welcome to the show.
Hi, good to talk to you.
Hi, it's fantastic to have you on. Like Katie, very much our previous guest before this, regular kind of communicators on Twitter and stuff with all things Formula One. And the topic today, because David goes to, it's probably fair to say, a fair amount of kind of junior series and kind of, as much racing as you probably can get to in the UK, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. I can't really do anything international, costs and travel and all the rest of it, so I always try to catch up with whatever's affordable, GT racing mostly, which is normally supported by junior series, Formula Renault, something like that, and obviously the Grand Prix has the F2 and the F3, so you catch up with quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's absolutely fantastic to do it, and actually going to like the smaller ones like Donington, Snetterton and Brands Hatch, they're fantastic race circuits to attend and access-wise as well, which I'm sure we'll cover within this. So leading on to the topic, from that, we are going to be looking today at kind of future stars of F1 within F2 and F3, who we kind of highlight and look to, and who to kind of look out in those junior series, and just general discussion around the junior series. In general. So what we will start off today with today's chat is probably the big ones on the tip of people's tongues next year, looking at maybe a title battle with Prema. Obviously had less a couple of years with ART racing, winning the last couple of championships, but obviously winning the two before that, Charles Leclerc being the last Prema winner. We are of course talking about Mick Schumacher and Robert Schwartzman. So we'll start off with you, David. What are your thoughts on those two and their prospective F1 futures?
Well, it's going to be a very interesting one. I can imagine Mick at the start of the season having the lead over Robert, but Robert tends to get very strong as the season goes on. He sort of almost a bit does it by stealth. Beyond the F3 season last year, if you look at his European F3 season, it was sort of like he's kind of came a little bit out of nowhere almost to win like Rookie of the Year and that. And last year he was strong from the word go, but that's because Prema just got the jump on all the other teams, I think. And his teammates had a little bit less settling in, perhaps. But so normally he sort of almost comes at people by surprise and sort of sneaks up on them a little bit in championships. By the end of the year, I can imagine him being up there with Mick in terms of challenging for the title. Mick himself usually is a bit of a second-year specialist. When he was in F4, first year in that, very much a learning year, a growing year, and then the second year in that, he came second in, I think it was the Italian F4. And then in, obviously, the European F3, first year, finding speed or whatever. And partway through the second season, it clicked in terms of setup or whatever. And I know that's a little bit controversial in terms of a lot of people thought there was other stuff going on there. But he still won the title in that. As it stands, he actually has enough points, I think, to do F1, even if he doesn't win the title. But, he should be... I would expect him to be one of the top three fighting for it this year.
I'd certainly agree with those points in terms of it. Mick Schumacher, I think we're going to really know if he can make the step up, or at least be a seat worthy of getting an F1 seat in that second season. You have seen a clear trend through his career, like you highlighted, that he's that second season specialist. He needs a year to kind of almost adapt and get into a car, learn how it works, and then you'll see the second year how he performs. And
what he said in interviews is that the F2 car is far heavier than what he's been used to in the past, which is fair. And he did show flashes last year. It's like he had some great drives through the field. The problem was it was normally after there'd been an incident early on in the race which had stuck him at the back to start with.
Yeah.
So he's had speed. It's just not always been at the noticeable end.
No, he's certainly fought in that midfield, probably packing around a bit. Obviously, with how the qualifying works, he's tended to generally be somewhere around that kind of 6th to 12th spot. That's generally been at season average, I would have said, for Mick. Where was his win again?
Was it Hungary? I can't remember.
I think it was Hungary. He certainly, because Hockenheim they didn't race, but he was driving Michael's car, wasn't he? I remember them having a break.
I think Belgium, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, actually, you're right on that one. Belgium was the one where he's driving his dad's car around. But on Robert, Robert just strikes me as one of those ruthlessly consistent drivers in terms of... I'm not sure... he excels because he's very good at being at like a 90-95% for the majority of the time, but I don't know if he's like a outstanding performer. You know, I can't think... I think what you said, he almost sneaks up quite good. He doesn't strike me as one that you go, wow, what a race, but he just always seems to be in a strong position within a race.
Yeah. So consistent form there, and normally he gets stronger as the year goes on. Last year he came out of the blocks very quickly, and I think that was why he got the jump on everyone else, making the most of the Prema package when they had the advantage on the other teams. But yeah, in Toyota Racing Series the year before, there was him and Marcus Armstrong going for it, and Richard Verschoor as well, I think it was. And all year it was like Marcus Armstrong was leading the title, Marcus Armstrong was leading the title. It's all about Marcus Armstrong versus Richard Verschoor. And Robert pinched it at the last race, and nobody sort of was like, hang on a minute, because it was the strong, consistent performances and picking up on other people when it had gone wrong for them or whatever.
It's very much, obviously he was in a comparative, you could kind of say the 2012-esque of Alonso in terms of he didn't necessarily win many races that season, bar obviously being the first one to win 2 races in that season, but he was always kind of in and around it because of just consistent podiums, and that's very much the type of style that I thought Schwartzman is. He will always get a good performance out of his car and give himself a chance being there at the end. He won't be one that has to play catch up or has to have some good performances or great race wins to keep him there. He'll always be a consistent level, so he will, especially at this level of junior Formula, be in and around the mix for a title.
Yeah, I say, well, consistency is key in all these things. If you look at Nick de Vries for the past few seasons or whatever else, he always had moments of pace and race-winning credentials, and always could potentially challenge for a race. But last year's season was the first year that he managed to consistently get it over the season, and that experience or whatever else paid off, and then he won the title as a result of it. But it had always been there, but that's what you need to actually challenge for the titles.
Exactly, and Robert has shown that in his previous experience. And I think the interesting one really is, obviously Ferrari own one seat in Alpha, don't they, which is one of their junior ones, which is obviously currently occupied by Giovinazzi, and I feel there's an interesting knock-on effect around about the main team in 2021 in terms of what happens with Seb, because I think Charles was pretty much locked in there. But it really does seem a fight between Mick and Schwartzman, and I suppose you can't really count Armstrong out of that because he is within the Ferrari program still, isn't he? So
next year is going to be, for me, especially as a Ferrari fan, is going to be one of the most interesting F2 seasons for years, because a quarter of the grid is made up of Ferrari Academy drivers,
which is
5 of them.
It's incredible, isn't it? So you've got Armstrong, Schumacher, Schwartzman. Galal still part of it, isn't he?
No, it's Callum Isler.
Yeah.
And it's Giuliano Alessi.
Of course. Oh, but hard. That is interesting, actually. Giuliano Alessi as well. So I think, that moves on. I think we've probably covered Schwartzman and Schumacher quite well. Callum Isler is interesting one. So I think we'll probably round off the Ferrari contenders for me in terms of Callum Isler, Armstrong, and Giuliano Alessi. What are your thoughts on those guys?
Well, Callum Isler a little bit in the GP3 this year in that, perhaps underperformed, I thought. He finished third behind two of his ART teammates, Hubert and Mazepan, and I'm very surprised that he didn't at least finish second in that. So he came into F2 last year perhaps with a little bit to prove. Sort of did a little bit of half a job on that, perhaps. Certainly at moments looked very strong. Qualifying on pole in some races. Good performances. It's hard to tell if it had been at a Prema or an ART or something like that, it would have been even stronger. But he was at Charus, and they're not one of the named outfits really in F2. They're a midfield team, kind of. So this year, again, second year, it'd be encouraging to see if he can build on that. But it's a bit like the Mick Schumacher thing of, second year, using the experience from the first year, especially with things like tyres. He did grow as last season went on, so this year he could be another one challenging. I think he's at Universiosi with Guan Yu Zhu. Again, another one who had quite a good rookie year last year, just learning the car, getting to grips with tyres and stuff. So if that team can continue the momentum it had from last year, and the drivers can, then they could be challenging as well. It's by no means a 2 or 3 horse race.
No, I think that's what makes it so exciting, and I think that's what is getting a lot of. For me, there seems just a general. I don't know. Maybe I'm just paying attention to it more because of obviously being aware with the YouTube stuff. But it feels a little bit more of a buzz around this F2 season, that there is a lot of exciting talent within that and potential for the title, for the interesting title. And it's interesting to see. Obviously, you mentioned Zal, that we'll talk about a little bit more on, but different teams who linked in. Dan Ticktum obviously linked with Williams as well. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting in terms of the title fights for there. But yeah, Callum, I thought he performed very well this year, considering the team and machinery that he was in. Very solid performances, and was competing towards the top half of the table. It is going to be really interesting with his new team alongside Zhao, because obviously Jota did quite well there last year. He's given up on his single-seater career, actually, hasn't he? And
I think he has. The problem is largely with him was budget to a certain extent, because 4 years or whatever it is in GP2 and F2 now, you can spend only so long really there before you have to move on to something else. But having he wasn't part of an academy or anything else, so trying to form links with F1 teams, get testing or whatever else, can prove incredibly difficult if you don't have the links, if you don't have a budget, if you're not making names, or for whatever else, not perhaps getting the contacts or whatever that you might otherwise do.
I think that is the main issue there. He never was able to establish a link or be attached to any teams, and I think obviously Red Bull Junior program was almost like the carving arc of it, but the other teams have really caught on. Obviously, we've said Ferrari have 5 juniors in the program this year. You got they're referred to, rather than Red Bull juniors, aren't they, more Honda juniors, Matsushita.
Yeah, he wasn't it. Obviously, the Red Bull juniors themselves, they had 3 that were in F3 last year. But the tale of the tape is that Vips has gone off to do Super Formula. And one of the reasons apparently for that is it costs less. So they're sending him to Japan to do Super Formula, while Ferrari, because of costs, when Ferrari is sticking 5 people in F2, there's a heck of a difference in investment.
Yeah, I mean,
I get also some of that is because it's Japan and Honda, etc., so strong links there. But surely you want your juniors racing against the people from the other academies. I don't know.
It could very much be, and it's a difficult one because Super Formula is a very unique series, and it's probably quite a good time. We'll drift into F3 here because obviously Yuri Vips was one of the stars of it. He only needed, and he narrowly missed out on it, didn't he? He only needed 3rd in the championship this year to secure enough points that he could have been able to drive for Red Bull. And I know obviously that was Red Bull's thinking with Dan Ticktum when they sent him to Super Formula, was it's an early part of the year for him to secure the Super Formula points so that they could put him in a potential Toro Rosso seat in, I believe the initial plan was for Dan in 2020, but obviously performance and other issues let him drop out of the system there. But I think they're going the same path with Yuri Vips here in Super Formula.
Well, I think originally they were hoping to put Dan in 2019, but then of course Mick won the F3 title, so they had to have a contingency plan. But then they stuck Dan in Asian F3 Winter Series, I think it was, to try and get some points. And then there was an argument about that, and in the end they weren't suitable for super license points, and he had a bad time over there anyway. So he wouldn't have been eligible for them anyway, and he didn't even bother doing the last race in that series. And it's all sort of stemmed from there. Since he, I hesitate to say lost his head a little bit, but got upset or suspicious and made a few comments about Mick Schumacher winning the F3 title, his career's pretty much gone into freefall for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think it is the scary thing for me in these in the junior formula, where they are. It's easy to forget they are young kids, and if they don't have the right people around them, we're all immature in that age, and he was very much hyped up, I believe. And, and
Christ. If people, looking back on what I was like at that age, I was a complete disaster. So, I completely understand why he had the difficulties he did. And if there wasn't the correct people saying to him, look, you need to rein this in, you need to do this, you need to learn, you need to whatever, then, he has gone a bit hot-headed. But as people have pointed out, we talk about him talking about how Prema and Mick may have cheated or what have you. Yuri Vips made the same thing about Prema, saying that how they cheated to secure Robert Schwarzer the top rookie in Euro F3 the other year. Then, of course, you've had Max Verstappen coming out and saying about Ferrari cheating and what have you. And there's an argument, how is what Dan said too different to that? So
I think drivers, it's very easy to stick, and I think especially in the modern world, obviously what he did in F4 in terms of driving through the safety car to crash out his opponent.
That was horrendous. The thing is, it's that thing. The guy's talented. You want to see him learn from it, progress from it, and come on and be the driver that we think he has the ability to be. And the problem is, so long as he's making comments or whatever else, everyone's reminded of that incident again, and it's not going to go away so long as he's not being careful.
Exactly. When you make a mistake like that, people don't need much of an excuse to kind of remember the bad you've done rather than the good you've done. But I would say, yeah, it's probably quite a nice point to talk about Dan Ticktum in terms of back to F2. Obviously, losing that seat in the Red Bull programme, for me, for the character that it seems that Dan Ticktum is, a Helmut Marko, for me, isn't the type of guy to necessarily rein in that type of guy and get the best out of him. Being under now the Williams flag, obviously a very historic English team in Formula 1, generally for me a more level-headed and a bigger picture style of F1 team, alongside Dams, who obviously came second with Latifi last year. And did they win the constructors, or
They did. They won the team's championship as well, because they said Sergio Gamera there as well, who was also very strong.
So I just think it feels like last shot saloon, but in the junior formula it is very much on that risky side of things. But if he's going to perform, he's got a very good platform in F2 next year.
Well, the thing is, Dams obviously are a team with lots of experience. They've won the championship. They won GP2 multiple times. They are one of the big three teams in it. So even though the driver pairing is perhaps not what you would look at and think that's a championship-winning driver lineup, the experience of the team, the engineers they've got, or whatever else, if Dan in a rookie, full season of rookie season of F2, because he has dipped in and out of it for a few races before
and performed fairly well from memory in those performances. All things considered.
Yeah, the thing is, it's all things considered, isn't it?
Yeah.
The problem is, over a couple of races or whatever, you're never going into it partway through a season. You've not had the track time in the car, you've not had the testing, you've not had the experience of the tyres or whatever. So it's always very difficult coming into something like that against people who obviously have spent that time with the cars, with the tyres, with the teams, getting used to gelling with the engineers and what have you. So having the chance from scratch with a team like Dams, it could give him a good shot at it. But again, he's a rookie in that against a lot of very experienced drivers who have had a year or 2 years or whatever with the car and the tyres under their belts. So if we're looking at last year's rookies and going, well, they did well for rookies, we can't be necessarily looking at Dan Ticktum and thinking he's going to make a title shot.
Exactly. I mean, the last one to win in their rookie season was Charles Leclerc, and we've seen the talent he was. And before that,
the season before last was rather good as well.
Yeah.
Because you had brain's gone completely to sleep.
The triple, the Russell, Norris, and Albon.
Yeah. So George Russell and Lando were obviously rookies in there, and they did rather well for themselves.
Yeah.
But I think the thing with them is they were coming in when it was a new car.
Yeah.
So they didn't have the disadvantage to the others that some other rookies have when they come in. And obviously now they've had that car for a couple of years or whatever and are more used to it, it hands more of an advantage back to the experienced drivers again.
The only thing that is interesting is I do believe they will be using the 18-inch rim tyres in preparation for F1 using them in 2021.
That's possible, yeah.
So
I can't remember. I know they took them out for a run in testing, didn't they?
I'm convinced they are running them next season, because F2 is often the
you might be right.
The trial there. So and Pirelli tyres as well are always. I think it's often described as a unique, compared to any driving series, how to drive with the Pirelli tyres. So getting new tyres in that aspect could level the playing field out a little bit for those rookies coming in, like the Schwartzmans. And probably a nice time to talk on to the guy who came runner-up, Marcus Armstrong, and your thoughts on him. Obviously joining ART, the team who have won the Drivers' Championship for the last 2 years.
Well, yeah, that's a good sign. It's an interesting signing for them, because it's his first time since 2017. He won't be driving for Prema, because he was with them in F4, he was with them in Euro F3, he was with them in F3. So it's quite a big leap for Marcus to a certain extent, changing teams. But again, they are one of the big three teams, so if you're going to, they're a good place to go. Marcus is a bit of a cheeky Kiwi, so he tends to get on pretty much wherever he goes and whatever he does. Talking about form with him, of course, whether it's Winter Series, like Toyota Racing Series, he's finished second there a few times. In F4, he finished second to Yuri Vips in German F4 and won the Italian F4. In Euro F3, partway through the season up to Silverstone, he was actually leading it, but it was only his teammates and Yuri coming strong at the end that he slowly dropped down in that, but clearly very, very talented. I think in terms of raw pace, he's probably got more raw pace than Schwartzman has, but it's just not quite fine-tuned, the consistency.
But yeah, I would agree with that in terms of Armstrong seems to have that natural pace, and obviously I kind of feel like Prema might have said to them, or Ferrari might have said, whoever finishes higher in F3 can have the Prema seat in F2 next year. And obviously with Schwartzman winning the championship in F3 and Armstrong coming runner-up in that, it naturally went to them, because obviously within Formula 2 they are still the case where each team is only allowed to run 2 cars, aren't they? So they were never going to drop Mick Schumacher after one season unless he had been truly horrific, and obviously he'd still shown glimpses of showing potential to progress. But Armstrong does possess that pace, and interesting, one of the key, obviously we've had the Aussies come through in terms of Mark Webber and Daniel Ricciardo, but it would be interesting to kind of see a Kiwi on the grid and going there. I think he's certainly one of the rookies to look out for, and within that team and away from Prema and Schwartzman, he may necessarily flourish. A different kind of environment that might bring him that sort of consistency, different kind of voices to his ear that might kind of guide him and give him that kind of advice that he needs to maybe improve his consistency.
Possibly. The thing is, I don't know how it works with the other academies and stuff, but with the Ferrari academies, the drivers are all very much in a sort of training environment together. I mean, Marcus actually lives in Maranello. I ran into him once there when I was standing outside Fiorano Circuit taking pictures, and he was then going into Fiorano to go to the gym.
Oh, wow.
It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, he tries... He's very much sort of involved in it, very much wanting to learn, very much wanting to... But he'll be training there alongside Robert. I think he lives with Callum Isla. They're very much trained as a unit, the Ferrari Academy.
But so, obviously, having that unit then, but still then going in external teams on a race weekend, will be an interesting environment, and it'll be it probably who's partnering him alongside ART. I've forgotten.
It's not confirmed yet, but it's likely to be Christian Lundgaard, because although they haven't confirmed him, he was there doing testing for them. So we'll see on that one. They might decide Christian could do another year in F3.
Yeah. Obviously, yeah. Who was he given? Who did Lundgaard race for at the end? Was it? It wasn't Arden, was it? Was it Trident?
Possibly Trident, yeah.
I think it was in the Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, Bosch ran out of budget or had an issue with one of his sponsors, and basically they reneged on some of the money that they were going to pay him, so he couldn't keep the hold of the seat. Which is a shame for him, but
it's a shame. Shame on a driver, and I'm sure it'll be something that you talk about at some point in this, in terms of F2, F3. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have the bank account to fund it, your luck is going to run out at some point, and especially if you don't have the backing of an academy like a Ferrari or a Red Bull Junior Academy.
The thing is,
go on.
This cuts all the way down to karting. I was watching a program called Britain's Fastest Youngster, I think it was, and it was following like a few races for like 2 10-year-olds and an 8-year-old. And they turned around to the dad of the 8-year-old and said, "How much money have you spent on his karting career this year?" And the guy had a think for a bit, and he said, "Probably over £130,000.
It's a small amount, David, isn't it?
Fund his 8-year-old's karting career.
Unbelievable.
Bearing in mind, in the UK, where the average income is 30,000.
Yeah.
So that's more than 4 times the average income, which is staggering.
Well, it's unbelievably insane, isn't it? Crazy.
Yeah. And that's obviously for a team and travelling about, and this guy had been off to Florida and done a competition and stuff there, and they're taking part in like 60-odd races or something stupid that year. But that's the point. If you're some person, say with a second-hand car or whatever else, rocking up with his dad as his engineer, and doing about 25 races a year because that's all you can afford, and that's still a hell of a lot. And you're against people doing 50, 60 races a year who are members of teams, who have mechanics behind them, who regularly go to the gyms, who get simulator time and all this sort of stuff, have fresh tyres whenever they want them. How are you ever supposed to compete with that to get the results, to get noticed?
It is very elitist, and it is something that differs, and it is something. It's really difficult to fix because, unfortunately, the industry it costs to have the best engine. It costs to have the best tyres, the best cars, and everything like that.
I've had chats with guys who are in like F3 and stuff, and it was sort of talking to them about, if you don't have that money, you're not going to be at the best team. You're not, they got the drive in this F3 team, but it was with limited testing time because they couldn't basically afford to do the testing. And then you're obviously at a disadvantage in terms of getting time with the car, getting time with tracks and what have you. And then when they did get testing, it was going testing with one set of tyres where you had guys at other teams slamming a new set on every time they went out.
Exactly, and it's realistically finding the best thing is to find those sponsors early, and to get backed. If you don't have rich parentage, you've got to be able to have a way of showing your initial skill, and then finding that sponsorship there, and that is the only way that you can compete, because the price is absolutely ridiculous. And it's what's quite nice about we'll drift into the W series quickly, and I think we'll probably mention quickly, obviously a lot of people have hope for Jamie Chadwick maybe one day progressing into F1. I think she's probably of a generation that might not quite make it. It'd be interesting to see how she does in F3 Asia.
Jamie Chadwick is a very, very talented racer, and I think the likes of her, Sophia Flörsch or whatever else, can go head-to-head with male racers and make them work for it. But I don't think she's necessarily F1 standard.
That
is that thing where having a name out there, being someone that, you know, girls who might be watching racing or whatever can actually look at and go, you know, she's racing them, I want to be like her, is encouraging for the next generation coming through. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly, because I know you were at the finale of the W Series at Brands Hatch, and so were me and Ash as well. And I've never seen that many young girls at a motorsport event and shown interest and really excited to kind of see the drivers, and that is the real positive. And in terms of a basis for not necessarily giving F1 but for other motorsporting series, giving the likes of Alice Powell and Marta Garcia, who clearly are very talented drivers but had to give up in terms of financial reason. It's very nice that it's now led on to other things, like I believe Alice Powell's attached to one of the Jaguar I-Pace teams.
Yeah, she's racing Jaguar I-Pace this year, yeah.
Which, is fantastic, because Formula E and the whole circus around that is a growing industry, and she wouldn't have ever got that opportunity if it hadn't have been for her performances, and I imagine continued performances in W Series this year. So I think that's quite a nice series, and maybe a male equivalent would be quite nice. But, they've already invested so much to get to that level. But you know what I mean, in terms of, it would be quite nice, have that pool of talent, and then a series like that to just raise awareness, because that's what it is at the moment. The W Series itself isn't any sort of... But if you win it, it's not going to give you any sort of recognition or aspired title, but it might give you a step on the ladder that you can go on to achieve something, which I think is good for motorsport.
The thing is, what a lot of them are doing with some of the prize money they're winning is using it for like winter series things that they might not otherwise been able to afford to do, to give them more time, more track time with the car or whatever else, so that they can then put that towards the next year to try and progress again, and forward motion, etc. Exactly,
which is it's a smart way of doing things. But going back to, it was a nice drift off, I think, into the monetary side of things, and in terms of the struggles that people face even to get to the likes of now Formula 3 and Formula 2. Who would cover? Zhao would probably be a good one to cover. Obviously the Renault-linked driver, and obviously flying the flag of China. I think he's a very interesting one, because going back on the financial link, having someone from China to compete is another market that F1 can tap into.
Well, yeah, it's the same to a certain extent. Some of the Indian drivers coming through, Jahan Daravala, etc. It's progressing into other markets and what have you, which are growing markets, growing economies. Obviously, teams, manufacturers or whatever else are looking at trying to get into their markets, because you can sell a lot of cars if you get your name known in there. So, especially China, which has to be one of the biggest growing car economies in the world.
Yeah, and the positive for them is Zhao actually has the talent to back it up. He does look an exciting one. Obviously, a lovely touch. Obviously, the tragic talent that we're unfortunately not talking about in this one is Antoine Hubert. With that, horrific accident at Spa, but nice touch of him winning that Antoine Hubert award, which is obviously the Rookie of the Year.
I think it's brilliant that they've introduced that, definitely.
Yeah, I think it was an incredibly nice touch, and the tribute to Hubert, Whiting and Nicky Lauda at the FIA Awards was very well done by them, and it was nice remembering the people within the community that we've lost this year. But yeah, Zhao obviously winning that, considering, you know, the likes he was up against it. It was Callum Isler and Mick Schumacher within that. You know, he was up against some talented drivers and came out on top, which was pretty impressive.
There's a big irony about that, of course. Well, Callum and Nick are both Ferrari Academy guys. Guan Yu Zhu wasn't a Ferrari Academy guy, but he got dropped because of inconsistency. And then typically the year after they drop him, because he wasn't performing, he performs.
You can very much say that with Nick de Vries in this season. Obviously, he'd been linked to McLaren all his career, hadn't he? And the year that McLaren let him go and he wasn't associated with anyone, which obviously probably ultimately cost him his route into F1, because I think he probably would have been a better option than Latifi in F1.
Well, I think, yeah, if you look at everything else he's doing, it's just like Nick de Vries has explored every avenue of motorsport recently, practically.
Yeah.
He's now being linked potentially with the drive for Toyota in the hypercar category in WEC.
Wow.
As if an LMP2 isn't enough, you know.
Well, exactly, which is mad. But Formula E seems like that series, which is, I suppose, if you love racing, quite nice, because obviously you have a couple of the guys competing in DTM. Obviously, Nico Muller's gone into that, and Robin Frins as well. So Nick de Vries, although the route he would have hoped was into F1, it certainly isn't the door closed on these guys if it doesn't quite work out as planned.
Well, that's the thing, is nowadays it's like if you don't make it into F1, you can still make a successful motorsport career. It's not seen as like a dead end anymore. You look at Jean-Eric Verne, for example, his career has absolutely flourished since he came out of Formula One. You know, in Formula One, it was running around in the midfield or whatever else. Yes, you were a Formula One driver, but since then, you know, he's won everything he's touched practically.
Exactly, which it's been incredible to watch, and very exciting. And he's made his own legacy, and now it's really up to him. He can pretty much go in any series. He could even come back to F1 probably if he wanted, with the 2021 rules. I doubt he ever would, but yeah, it's nice with these talents that they got
options.
He's
been asked about it before. It's been a case of, unless it was for one of the top teams, why would he necessarily choose to wander around in the midfield almost in oblivion when he could be winning titles elsewhere?
Well, yeah, exactly.
So it does raise the sort of question almost, you know?
Well, you look at the guys like Sebastian Bourdais, who obviously similar sort of thing, with promoted from F2 into Toro Rosso, and then, you know, made his way in IndyCar and became a 4-time champion within IndyCar. So it's not necessarily the end for these guys. Obviously, we're talking about the future F1 prospects, because obviously they are primarily F1 feeder series, but it is nice now, with the way that motorsport's expanded, that they do have so many options to still have successful careers pushing forward. Is there anyone necessarily in F2 that we've missed?
I know we did vaguely discuss Louis Delatraz earlier.
I think we discussed Louis Delatraz previous to the call, but yes, Louis Delatraz is certainly one, and certainly with his testing at the end of the season in Abu Dhabi, it needs to probably be someone noted, yeah.
I always get the feeling with Louis Delatraz is just like, he has that talent. He's sitting in that level with like maybe Callum Isler, maybe Sergio Settecamera, where if the season goes right and they get the chance, they could go on and win the title. But they're in danger of ending up, last year, for example, I think I did coin the phrase, Delatraz luck, because basically if it went wrong, it could go wrong. It did go wrong. Where he ended up in the championship doesn't reflect the speed he had that year at all. And yeah, I think if he had a clean season and it went his way, he could be another contender.
His main issue for me is probably the team, and is he linked to anyone?
He's got links with Haas.
Okay.
Him and Petro Fittipaldi seem to be their main two simulator and testing people, although Fittipaldi seems to get the nod more. I don't know whether he still is, but I know he has been.
I don't know with, obviously, Petro Fittipaldi. Obviously, he is grandson, isn't he, to, obviously, the great Emerson Fittipaldi?
Yeah, he is, yeah.
So,
his brother Enzo is a member of the Ferrari Academy.
Yeah. So, they... and Pietro's actually competing in F3 Asia at the moment, isn't he? I believe he went out there.
He is at the moment, yeah. So, I mean, his career's been a bit left, right, and all over the place. Strangely, for someone with the surname Fittipaldi, I always get the feeling he hasn't necessarily had perhaps the most complete budget. He did like Renault World Series the year after it was World Series when nobody else was doing it, and it was like the bargain basement championship. It's been that kind of career where he's never quite been in the right place or been with the top team or been, so I mean with that name he's someone who has pace, but because he's not necessarily competing in the top championships, you don't necessarily know how he might compare to, say, Mick Schumacher or whoever else. So he's an interesting one, but he's a bit out of the loop almost, I think.
I'd agree, and with that Haas link, I do believe Louis Delatraz probably would naturally, for me, would be a link. And if Haas decide, I mean, I know Haas' philosophy since they've been a team has been experience. They don't like rookies coming in. I mean, I don't know if they'll change that philosophy, seeing how well the likes of a George Russell, Albon, Norris have done.
Well, the thing is, Ferrari have asked them time and time again about taking one of their academy guys, and they never have. I mean, Charles Leclerc spent some time there as tester and did testing with them and stuff, but he was never sort of accepted as part of their program to a certain extent or had links with them. They seem, for a team that buys so much stuff from Ferrari, they do very much try to be their own team as far as it goes.
Well, they are budget shoestring F1 team, aren't they? So I kind of feel because they can't afford for things to go wrong. They can't really afford the likes of a rookie maybe underperforming, where, I mean, I know some people will argue that with Roman Grosjean they don't necessarily go there, but people forget Roman Grosjean, it will be his 10th year in F1 next year. Magnussen now has quite a bit of experience behind him, and Grosjean's been there from day one, so understands how they are a team that works, that is different really to any other F1 team on the grid, because when I imagine they're developing stuff and everything, it's odd to another team because they aren't necessarily developing their own parts. Their chassis made by someone else, as much parts as they can. They buy in from other teams, mainly, like you said, Ferrari, especially the engine front. So it is kind of a difficult place for a rookie to go into anyway.
Yeah. But they've not been interested when the suggestion has been ever put to them. The thing is, I mean, Romain's on-track performances aside or whatever else, of course, they do value his input in terms of on the technical side, because he was the guy who basically said, this isn't working, let's go back to the original spec and see if we can try and work out what the hell's going on. last year. There's an argument that if they'd listened to him sooner, they might have managed to save a little bit more of their season.
It's a very good point, and that is the type of thing where, obviously, having that Ferrari link and Ferrari having so many juniors, they'll be frustrated by that point. But like you said, they do look to be as individual as possible. So that's why it kind of makes interesting with those kind of 5 guys we're talking about Ferrari. It is, unless it relies on Kimi retiring and what they do with Giovinazzi, whether he gets promoted as a number 2 to Leclerc or whether he gets dropped entirely, whether they put in, would Alpha be comfortable fielding 2 rookies in an F1 season? You know, those are the type of things that, because as much as they help fund Alfa Romeo, I can't imagine a team would ever be happy with having 2 rookies as their driver, no matter how highly they are rated.
Well, the thing is, at the end of the day, you can only one person can win the championship. So there's an argument Ferrari would only need to promote one person at a time.
Indeed.
With Giovinazzi, there's 2 things they could do, of course, is that if he does perform really well, they could potentially promote him to the Ferrari team if Seb leaves or what have you. The alternative is they could keep him at Sauber Alpha. I've had that conversation as well about name changes. They could keep him at Alpha as well, alongside a junior to provide the experience there. Because if Kimi retires, obviously you'd want an experienced guy there, and by that point Giovinazzi would have that.
Exactly, it would be then becoming his 3rd season within Formula 1. Therefore, he would have had at least a substantial amount of experience compared to other guys coming through, depending on what's available.
But one thing I did hear was that Ferrari had actually missed a little bit in the simulators, because apparently his simulator feedback had been very good. So that would, give an experience and whatever else as well with the actual car on an actual track. That would all play quite well together on that front. Yeah,
it certainly would. So I think we covered F2, and we kind of covered Yuri Vips in terms of he seems the next Red Bull junior driver for me to progress, because he is so close to those Super Formula points, but it's whether Super Formula is a very tricky series. Can he get those Super License points before, do they leave in an F3 just to kind of make sure that he can get the points? It is an interesting one, but he's certainly a very quick talent and an exciting driver, I believe.
Well, he's been going arm in arm practically with Marcus Armstrong for about the past 3 years. I mean, I think I even joked that it was like anyone who went wheel to wheel with Marcus, Red Bull was signing, because of course Liam Lawson beat Marcus to the Toyota Racing Series, and what happened? Immediately after, he ended up as a Red Bull junior. Yuri Vips beat Marcus Armstrong to the F4 title and narrowly pipped him in the Euro F3 in the rookie standings, and straight after that got signed as a Red Bull junior. It's just, they're obviously keeping their eye on Ferraris, guys.
Well, I think you'd have to, wouldn't you? You'd have to go with the amount that they've invested in Formula, in their junior academy program. If a guy's not on them and competing with their guys, you've got to go, well, there's got to be something about this kid, haven't you?
Yeah, that's worth a look at. But I don't know. So we were talking, possibly looking at where else they can go on that in their F3 series. Of course, they've also had 2 other Red Bull juniors competing in that. And you've got to fancy, after a year of experience in that, at least one of them would probably be fighting for the title next year.
Exactly, yeah. And you think probably from the Prema front, Jevan Daruvla, he's probably obviously finished 3rd last year.
He's not confirmed what he's doing yet, so...
I would assume, with the amount that went up to F2, that he isn't making that step up. So he would be the guy who would be left to kind of compete and rack up his super license points in F3, and certainly would be a title challenger for me.
Yeah, it would make sense. Interestingly, the only person I know of that Prema have confirmed so far in F3 is Logan Sargent, which I think is a little bit left field, but there you go.
Yeah, very.
He's a solid performer. I mean, he's come through British F4, Formula Renault, I think he did as a rookie the other year and was decent in that. He's had the same problem as, say, the likes... several drivers in F3 had last year, as in it was a new car and Prema just got the jump on everyone in terms of getting to grips with it, and some teams like Carling or whatever else were just left a bit flat-footed, and if you weren't in like Prema and then maybe High Tech or ART eventually, you weren't getting into the points. So you had guys like Felipe Drugovich who were pretty decent, who just you never saw them because they weren't at the sharp end. So Carlin underperformed last year, and I think that's why it was almost be a surprise that Logan Sargent is getting into the Prema when you didn't really see him last year. But next season, I think he could be worth watching. Yeah,
well, being within a team like Prema, and they will always be a top team within those junior categories, it is very interesting to kind of see how it goes, and it'll be interesting. There's been some rather good, I think, regional F4 guys. I don't know if Zane Maloney, obviously winning the British F4 this year, whether he will be confirmed in F3. I think he was hopeful of competing at least in either the Euro Formula 3 or the official F3 that follows the international grid around.
It's likely to be either regional European Formula or perhaps Formula Renault, I'd have thought. Because Formula Renault used the same type of chassis as regional F3. So it's sort of on the same kind of level, you know?
Yeah. But...
then you had... from the Formula Renault last year, you had some guys like Oscar Piastri, Victor Martins and Alexis Smollier are all pretty decent. Calcolat and Victor Martins are Renault juniors. Alexis Smollier's got S&P backing, you know, from Russia and what have you. Oscar Piastri, I don't think has got the backing the others have, but he won the Formula Renault title, so he's pretty decent. So all of them have got shots about potentially ending up in F3 next year. Otherwise, in the Formula European regional, I keep wanting to say F3, but it wasn't called F3 because there was the original European F3 was originally planning on running last year and then didn't get enough entries, so that went basically under. But because it was going to run, Formula Regional Europe couldn't be called F3. So that might be called F3 next year. It all gets very confusing. But yeah, they had obviously Frederick Vesti ran away with that one. And he had links with Prema. He was Prema driver, and he ran with Prema at Macau, and unfortunately got caught up in like the first lap incident, which sort of dropped him for the main race as well the following day. But he showed plenty of pace, considering he hadn't had a lot of time with that car. So you've got to fancy him, I'd have thought, at Prema next year as well in F3 proper.
Yeah. And I think this is the exciting thing with junior Formula in terms of the more money that is within Formula 1. It kind of does filter down each level and stuff, and then they see how important it is about maintaining and securing a kind of almost a constant flow of very talented drivers coming through, and it just kind of seems to be getting a little bit more organised and a more kind of fine-tuned funnel towards the top. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I'd say, I mean, the problem we had this season to a certain extent is that they've changed the cars around. So you had new cars with the halo and what have you on them. They changed a lot of the feeder series around, introducing the regional F3 ones, which then made things like the Formula Renault have to have a look at itself, and they got new cars. They got regional F3 cars as well, and the traditional European F3, which was the development from, I think, the German F3 originally, that then ended up basically on the scrap heap and going under. And that meant you had a lot of series like European Formula Regional, where they started the season with quite a weak grid, where you only had about 11 cars or something on it. Van Amersfoort thought originally you were one of the big F3 teams in Europe, weren't going to be in it, and then because European F3 went under, they then entered it with Sophia Flörsch and eventually ended up with more drivers as it went along. But next year, that series I would expect to be stronger. This is sort of very much a development year and a growing year and a trying to find your footing some series year.
Yeah. No, I'd kind of agree with that. It is, as soon as you get below F2, there is, with the regional stuff, it is trying to assert it, and it's whether it gets the backing of the quality of what it can bring to a driver in terms of their development, which is very interesting on that front. But I think we've probably covered F2 and F3 in terms of the drivers who are the main ones who can come forward into Formula 1, and certainly ones to look out in the championship next year, and also just quite a nice look at Formula 2 and F3 in general, because it is such an important thing, and people don't realise, most people see the kind of the tip of the iceberg, which is F1, but there's this whole kind of other ball game below it, and people racing for years just to get to that stage of an F2 potentially getting into an F1 seat. But yeah, it's been a fantastic chat, David. I've loved having you on, and it was a topic that I was really excited to talk about because I knew you're incredibly knowledgeable about it. Have you enjoyed your time coming on?
I have, and I'm looking through my list of notes, and there's so many drivers I haven't mentioned, like the F4 guys going through, or Max Futrell, or Jack Aitken, and it's just like, really?
Yeah, you just go.
There you go.
We could
what I mean.
we could literally sit and talk about talk about this for another hour or two, easily in terms of that. But in terms of, it is quite exciting because on our channel around this hype, we are going to be launching some more F2, F3 specific content. So we're going to run series there, and I'm sure with your expertise, we'll certainly call on it again to chat about things with it. So yeah, I think it's something certainly to get in, and I think it's exciting. If you love F1, you've got to love the junior series because there's so much exciting drivers to go.
Really good.
Yeah, it is, because
in terms of wheel-to-wheel action or what have you, you've got it. You know, you go to F1 for the heritage, for the prestige, for the glamour, for the whatever else. F2 and F3, you have the racing.
And it's just kind of spec series. It is mainly all about their pure purpose is not necessarily Constructors' Championships. It is purely really for finding those next generation of talent. So yes, there are the top teams within it that if you do have an advantage, but yeah, it still really is a massive kind of challenge for the drivers, and yeah, that on-track battling is fantastic to see.
Yeah. But, I mean, I say in the F2 and F3 leagues, you've got drivers who have been racing each other for 3 or 4 years, perhaps even back to their karting days. I mean, when they're talking about Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc now, and they're showing footage from them in their karting days, and they're still giving each other the same grief as they are now, is brilliant.
Exactly. It's fantastic to watch, and you go, that's what's exciting, because you don't see it and we think, oh, this is the rivalry developing in F1, and you go, like you said, that rivalry's been developing for years, the way that they've been competing against each other. But again on that front, absolutely fantastic year coming on. Loved. This is why we started this F1 Worldwide Fan Podcast, because it's talking to kind of fans like you and just sharing their kind of love. And this was a great topic I was interested in doing, because I have knowledge on the subject, but it's lovely kind of, for me, just learning about new things and just having a discussion and going on that front. So thank you, David, again so much for coming on. Really appreciate that, and glad you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, cool.
And as usual,
as nervous as I thought I might be.
I think it's one of those things, and for anyone listening who wants to come on and talk, the fan podcast is here for anyone to kind of come on and have a chat. But yeah, I think as soon as we start talking, it is just literally a conversation about motorsport, which is something that we all share and love. But yes, that probably rounds it off, guys. It has been a long one, but for me and for David, it's been a very enjoyable one, and I hope you've enjoyed it. But for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.